All right. So we're going to be talking about Mary Magdalene, which is a very controversial topic. But I know that you'll find this conversation of interest. Now, I know a little bit about Mary Magdalene in my studies at Claremont Graduate University. In fact, one of my mentors was named Marvin Meyer, who did a lot of work with Mary Magdalene, and he was one of the translators of the Gospel of Thomas, of the Nag Hammadi Library, and he's one of the reasons why I got into Claremont in the first place, and he was a very big inspiration to me. So, and also when it comes to Mary Magdalene, I have traveled about to a large portion of the sites that were deemed as sacred to Mary Magdalene. So I have visited the sites, for example, in Ephesus or Vézelay or, you name it in southern France. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to incorporate that conversation towards the end. But I have to introduce Mary Magdalene. Now, hold on to your horses. Not that there's horses to be held on to here, because I'm going to have to go into quite a little bit of biblical history. We just have to do it. I know it's not Sunday school, so don't and there's no punch and cookies afterwards. Sorry about that, but seriously, I still have to go into the early depictions of Mary Magdalene, and regardless of your viewpoint of the Gospels, whether you think they're inspired, whether you think that they come from a later period of time, that's not the point. The point is we still have to go into those traditions first because they seem to be some of the earliest depicting Mary Magdalene. And from there, that will act as a lens to understand the rest of the materials. So we're gonna cover Mary Magdalene not only in the New Testament, namely the four Gospels, but we're going to talk about Mary Magdalene within the other Gospels. We're going to be talking about Mary Magdalene within Gnostic writings. Yes, we are going to go there. We're going to be talking about Mary Magdalene within the context of early church history. We're going to be talking about Mary Magdalene a little bit in art and, of course, Eastern Christianity. Moving into Catholicism, we're going to be talking about Mary Magdalene when it comes to her legacy and controversies, like, for example, the Don't Touch Me moment, or the so-called idea that she's a prostitute, which is not true. And also, we're going to talk about where she died and possible burial places. And we're even going to go into a little bit of Da Vinci Code stuff too. So it's a packed day full of materials. And I know you will not be disappointed, but we still have to start with the New Testament. So here we go. So Mary Magdalene is very important in the Gospels. She is, in fact, she's mentioned in Matthew, and she's mentioned in Mark, she's mentioned in Luke, and she's mentioned in John. In fact, if you take the combined Gospels, she is mentioned a total of 12 times. 12 times. That makes her tied with the Apostle Thomas as numbers of times mentioned. And that also makes her fourth, because she's tied with Thomas. That before her is Peter, James, and John. So that shows quite a bit of significance right away. She's recorded as traveling with the rest of the disciples. So she is presented at the crucifixion of Jesus. She is said to have been a witness after the resurrection of Jesus, and the first to see him, and the first to tell others about this event. In fact, in many cases within early Christian history, she's viewed as the apostles, the apostle of the apostles, the apostle of the apostles. So as far as leadership roles, yeah, she has it. Okay. So now we're going to go into some of the specifics, but before I do, I'm going to have a little sip of water here. Don't worry, it's not holy water. Otherwise, I'll be burning up. I'm just kidding. Okay. All right, so here we go. Um, according to Mark 16:9 and Luke 8:2, Jesus was depicted as casting out 7 demons out of Mary Magdalene. 7 demons. In fact, Mark literally states Mary Magdalene as the one, quote, out of whom he had driven out 7 demons. Luke groups Magdalene as, quote, amongst some women who have been cured of evil spirits and diseases. Evil spirits and diseases. And then states simply, Mary called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out. So, what are these 7 demons? Obviously, there's lots of controversy, but the hint is in the Gospel of Luke, because in ancient times, when you got sick, right, they oftentimes believed that there was a demon that is connected to that illness. So in other words, she had 7 illnesses that ravaged her. In fact, we have that also in early Christian literature seems to support that concept. So she's not demon possessed. She has these illnesses that are connected to or associated with demons. Okay. Well, now let's move on to her title. The Gospel of Luke specifically states that Mary was called Magdalene. Magdalene. But she's called Magdalene in the Greek. It's a title. It's a designation. Okay, so it's not like a last name, So she's given a title. In ancient times, you're going to have people who are associated with various towns or cities, and they will get that as a title. Sometimes they get that title if they are a patron of that town or that city, and shows the fact that they are wealthy or they're well esteemed by the local community. So there you have it. So it seems to be an honorific title, and it's connected to then the city, or I should say the town of Magdala. Magdala. And yes, I've been to Magdala. So, uh, so the idea is throughout the Gospels, Mary as Magdalene is repaid. Now, the word Magdala, so we're talking about the town of Magdala. It's translated as meaning great or elegant or a tower, right? In fact, the Hebrew word for tower is Migdal, right? The city of Magdala is in an absolutely beautiful location. It is on the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee, directly at the foot of Mount Arbel. And up until the founding of the city of Tiberias in 19 CE, it was one of the few settlements along the shore of the Sea of Galilee. It is a beautiful town. It's very a nice size. It had the streets were well planned, showing Roman influence. Archaeologically, it goes back to the Hellenistic age. One of the town's main source of revenue is fishing. In fact, the archaeologists have discovered some of the fishing piers. They even found some of the fishing pools where they raise the fish. So one of the commodities was fish. The Jewish historian Josephus called Magdala, excuse me, the city of Parche, which translates in Greek as meaning the place of fish salting. So it's a place where they salted fish. The Talmud refers to the town of Magdala as Nunia, Magdala Nunia, which translates as Magdala of the fishes. So yes, fish were raised in pools, and then they were salted. And 4 of these pools have been discovered by the archaeologists. I find this really interesting. So we take a look at Magdala from an archaeological standpoint, because remember, I'm bringing this in. Mary Magdalene is from Magdala. She's pretty well to do. We don't really have a poor section of Magdala, right? So everybody seems to have enough. They're not all wealthy, but they're not a large poor population. Mostly middle to wealthy. They even found a synagogue, although the synagogue is from the first century. It is even contemporaneous to the time of the life of Mary Magdalene. So she probably went here. Very small. It only measures 11 by 11 meters with 6 columns supporting the ceiling. And of course, they found a small stone table that had 4 legs and a relief of a 7 branch candelabrum, so a menorah. It was built between 440 to 50 BC, CE. It was renovated and abandoned around 67 CE. So there you have it. Now, there's some rumors that Mary Magdalene is mentioned in Jewish writings in the Talmud, because in the Talmud in the 2nd century section, that mentioned a certain Miriam, the plaiter of women's hair, which is another way of describing a hairdresser in the most literal fashion. While some has said this refers to Mary Magdalene because the word for hairdresser is Magdalena, right? Uh, I really doubt it. So what they're basically saying is, let's get this, Mary Magdalene is Mary the hairdresser. No. Okay, so but there you have it. Sorry. Okay. According to Luke 18:1 through 3, Jesus traveled with the 12 apostles, quote, moving from one town and village to another, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God. Mary Magdalene, and it says Mary Magdalene, called Magdalene, was also with them. I think it's interesting that they say it twice, just to emphasize the fact, along with Joanna, the wife of Chuza, the manager of Herod's household, Susanna, and many others. I think what I catch here is Mary Magdalene comes from a more or less wealthier town, and she's keeping company with Joanna, the wife of Chuza, who is a manager of Herod's household. This is Herod Antipas, who was the king, the tetrarch of Galilee at that time. So that means that somebody that works for King Herod, you know, is hanging out with the followers of Jesus. Would that be a wealthy person? Of course, that's a wealthy person. So you got some rich women in the bunch. Is this interesting? It gets even more in a few seconds. Luke says that Mary Magdalene she's mentioned or numbered as one of the women, quote, who are helping to support them out of their own means. What do you mean? That means that Mary Magdalene is using her wealth to support Jesus and the other disciples. Like I said, if you believe this is true, it's wonderful. If you don't believe in this, it's still interesting because it still depicts her as a wealthy person. Does that make no matter what, you're stuck with it, right? And we're also stuck with the fact that the backers of Jesus's ministry are 3 women. Yeah, financed by 3 women. And then somehow Judas Iscariot gets stuck with being the treasurer. I wonder how Mary Magdalene got along with Judas. Hypothetically, obviously, right? Okay, so according to Mark 15:40, Matthew 27:56, John 19:25, Mary Magdalene directly witnessed the crucifixion of Christ. So there you have that. So what's kind of curious though, while the Gospel of Matthew, which is dependent upon the Gospel of Mark, and Q includes the fact that Mary Magdalene was present at Christ's crucifixion. The Gospel of Luke does not. This will get more interesting later on. I'm sorry we have to start this way. It's the only way to do it. Okay. Otherwise, you're not going to understand all the rest of the talk. It's interesting because Luke, the Gospel of Luke and Acts is connected to Gentile Christianity. It's connected to Pauline Christianity. It's connected to Christianity of the Latin West. And it's interesting that three Gospels mention that Mary is there, and the one that will be associated with the West happens to just omit that. It forgets that. It doesn't have it. It's not the first time you're going to see this, that that Mary is going to be neglected or not treated as well in the texts of the West. It is, by the way, the texts of the West and the traditions of the West that turn Mary into a prostitute. So it is that side. Okay, so let's keep on moving, right? Following the crucifixion, Mary was recorded as present at the burial of Jesus, according to Mark 15 and Matthew 27. So you have that. Next, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb on Sunday, just after his crucifixion, and discovered his body was missing, according to all four Gospels. So all four Gospels admit to that. It mentions that, right? And she came along with Mary, the mother of James, and Salome, and they brought some spices in order to anoint the body of Jesus. This is early in the week, and they found the stone rolled away, and there was a young man dressed in white and said, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus, the Nazarene, who was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him, but go tell his disciples and Peter." And of course, the story goes that trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb, and they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Unquote. So that's the version according to Mark. The Matthew version, pretty close because they're synoptics. You have, though, however, a violent earthquake that comes, and an angel of the Lord that comes down from heaven and rolls the stone away. And you have mention here of guards who are afraid, and they shook and became like dead men. And here the angel said pretty much the same thing to the women. And then, of course, what will happen is, so the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Okay, Luke, again, we're having again another version of it. Pretty close, except in this case, you have two men in clothes that gleamed like lightning. So as opposed to one, you get two, And again, the same message. And then, of course, they're told to announce these things to the 11 and to all the other women. And so you have that version. Okay, so then we have the Gospel of John. And it says also Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been rolled away. So there seems to be confirmation there. And then we have the Gospel of Peter. What? There's a Gospel of Peter? Yes. From the late first into the second century, we have a Gospel of Peter. Didn't get in. In this case, it calls Mary Magdalene a female disciple of the Lord. I think that's interesting. A female disciple of the Lord. The story is, again, pretty much the same. Okay, so there you have it. Now, we get to the last section of the biblical part. We'll jump into some of the other accounts. Hold on. We're getting there. You just have to get through this first. Most importantly, according to Mark, Matthew, and John, Mary Magdalene was the first to see Jesus resurrected. And according to these three, Mark, Matthew, and John, Mary talked with him and then went on to report her experience to the apostles. But not Luke. What? Luke admits this. Now it's getting strange. Why? I mean, it's in Matthew, it's in Mark. and it's in John, but not Luke. Well, why isn't it in Luke? It just not. It's not. In fact, the first sighting of Jesus is Jesus before these men who are on the path to Emmaus, on the road to Emmaus. Okay, now it's getting strange. So again, it looks like the Pauline version is deliberately now leaving out Mary Magdalene. It looked like an accident before. Now it's starting to seem almost intentional, especially since the big early tradition of the early church is that because Mary saw Mary Magdalene first, she's the apostle of the apostles. So she's the first true apostle. Something that maybe the Pauline school did not want to have admitted. Does that make sense? Right? So it gets even more curious because what happens is that Peter and Paul become part of the same school of thought. It becomes a Peter and Paul team. A long story, really short. How we're going to do this, I know exactly how. Is that there's a book called after the book of Luke called Acts or Acts of the Apostles, and you have two different schools of thought. You got the school of thought of Peter, and you have the school of thought of Paul. Peter seems to be in favor of if you're a Christian, you got to be Jewish. You got to follow the dietary laws. You got to be circumcised. That seems to be his thing, right? And so the idea of opening up Christianity to the Gentiles, the uncircumcised, heaven forbid, and that seems to come across. Well, in the book of Acts, Peter has this view. We see this also in the letters of Paul. And then what happens is that midway, he has this vision after seeing, it has to do with Cornelius, the procurator. Anyway, the long story short is that Jesus says, his vision on the rooftop, it says, behold, eat, and of course, it's all these unclean foods. He has his epiphany. The epiphany is that, hey, Gentiles and Christianity, it's okay. It's not a Jews only club. So that means that it becomes the Peter and Paul team. After that part of the book of Acts, Peter kind of peters out, and Paul takes over the rest of the narrative and brings Christianity to Rome. Is that making sense? So Peter and Paul are really the same. Now, originally, of course, the Peter books were Mark and of course, First and Second Peter, and of course, the Pauline books obviously is Luke and Acts, and will be the 13 epistles. You see 10 and the 3 added. Well, what will happen is the two will become together, and Peter and Paul are connected to the city of Antioch, and then they're also connected to the city of Rome. And so Peter and Paul are said to found the of course, the bishopric, right, the city of Rome, and of course, the first pope is then recognized by the Catholic Church as Peter. Are you guys following this? Why are you telling this, Dr. Riedfeld? Because in later writings with Mary Magdalene, Peter is Mary's nemesis. So Peter and Mary are always fighting. And I'm going to read those documents. Don't worry. Yes, they don't like each other. Well, this would then translate into the Pauline tradition of the Gospels. No wonder, right? It's not in there. You guys following this? Yeah. So these origins go back quite a ways. All right. So when it comes to Mary seeing Jesus, okay, so I won't go through all the versions. I'll just say that he sees, the Matthew version is that suddenly Jesus met them. So she's with the others. And greetings, he says. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and they will see me. The John version, though, is what I want to focus on because this figures in a lot in the later medieval period. We're going to go with talking about Mary and Jesus and their relationship, right? Yeah, it starts now. Now it's the good stuff. You guys You survived Sunday school. You got through. I gave you a golden star. In fact, I'm going to give you 5 gold stars for hanging in there. You will get punch and cookies after, unless you can't have punch. So here it is. Um, the John version goes as follows. Of course, you have 2 angels. Okay, so the other women went away. At this point, she turned around. Actually, I should say this. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw 2 angels in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." So she thinks that maybe that somebody took his body. It goes back into these early theories. At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." I think this is interesting. Whether you believe this is a real account or believe it's not, I still think it's interesting, a nice touch when she thinks that he's the gardener, right? That's interesting. You know, mistaken identity. Then Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," rabbi, which of course means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, or do not touch me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that he had said these things to her. Okay, so what's going on here? Don't touch me. I got to tell you this little story. My father is one of the translators of the New American Standard Bible. I grew up with a Bible translator. It's the 3rd largest English translation in the world. It's pretty cool. So I grew up in the 70s and 80s with a father that was always talking about this at the table. It's not really translated the way it's supposed to be. What? Surprise! Yes, so here we go. Okay, so the words "don't touch me." Okay, the word is me mu optu. Me mu optu. So what does that mean? Opto it's actually a verb. And now remember, it's translated as "don't touch me." Now I'm going to go through the verb. Listen up. The verb means to fasten to adhere to fasten fire to a thing, to kindle, to set a fire. Wait, that doesn't mean "don't touch me" at all. No, it doesn't. What does it mean? It means don't embrace me with passionate familiarity. Mary is, whoa, grabbing him, according to this translation. Apparently, your translators are going, "We can't have that. No, no, no. Don't touch me." It's like, no, it's don't. She wheelbarrowed into him. All right. So it made sense for a Semitic context, and it makes sense but apparently you got some cold translators out there. Now, what will happen is that then you're going to have 2 different perspectives of this. People who know the Greek, who are in the East, will go, "Wow, Mary is just really loved Jesus and was very emotional about it and was very familiar. So they must have been really close." So the idea of the closeness of Mary Magdalene and Jesus is not just in outside the Gospels. That's important for you to know. It's also in the Gospels, right? Now, let's go for Tertullian, even in the West, praised her, said that she did this. She reached out and embraced him out of love, not like curiosity or Thomas who didn't believe. So this is a big deal. You know what happens in the West, the Latin West? Eventually, in the Latin West, they make it improper. They make it improper. They say that Mary was unworthy to touch him because she was a woman. Patriarchy took control. Eventually, Pope Gregory would conflate an unknown fallen woman who washed his feet with Mary Bethany and mixed them both up to create Mary Magdalene, a new version, which is the fallen prostitute. But you can see what happens. In the West, it's like, and of course, when you take a look at it in the West, the word is noli me tangere, right? Tanger, right? Right? That's the Latin. And you know what the Latin means? Don't touch me. So the Greek is don't throw yourself at me, embrace me with this fiery passion, right? And of course, the Latin kind of tears it out. So sorry, that's unfortunate when it comes to translation. So what will happen is the Noli Me Tangere will be a very popular theme in art. In fact, many paintings, even you can see in Los Angeles from medieval times, depict this moment. Mary at first is fully clothed, wears a veil. By the time you get to the 14th, 15th century, she suddenly becomes sexualized, flowing red hair, wearing less clothing, and still reaching out to touch Jesus, like barely touching Jesus. And Jesus is like, no, I can't do that. Sometimes like this. This is the pro. This is the pose right here. No. Okay. So we see the division here. As I said before, in the Gospel of Luke, it's the disciples walking to Emmaus that first sees Jesus. Now let's go into another area of controversy since we're here, right? Let's go to the marriage feast of Cana. Marriage feast of Cana. This is, of course, there's many aspects of this, but the story is that, of course, Jesus is at this wedding, and the story goes as follows: is that uh, Jesus is at this wedding, and the wine runs out. Mary, the mother of Jesus, asked her son to provide a solution. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And it's kind of strange. It's like, so what? They ran out of wine, and Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Next, Jesus produced his miracle, turning the water into wine. Now, I want to stop there because I teach a Gospel of John class, and we go through the Greek. And you know what? That woman part, it's interpolated. In fact, there is a grammatical fragment in there. So somebody interposed that in there. I mean, it's kind of like, it's kind of strange that, Mary would you talk to him, and all of a sudden he would say, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not come." What does that have to do with anything? And scholars have been arguing about this forever. But what happens is that he turns the water into wine. Now, when the master of the feast tasted the water that now became wine, and he did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." Now, this is really strange, because you're thinking, why is this is somebody else's wedding? Why is it Mary's responsibility to have any authority in this? Why does Jesus feel that? And who is that bridegroom? Okay, well, of course, this is a riddle that happened quite a bit, right, over a period of time. And questions go as follows. First, why would Mary, his mother, be in a place of authority and feel responsible for the wine running out if she was not the mother of the groom, right? Second, why would Jesus feel obligated to produce this miracle? Third, the bridegroom imagery is constantly a theological archetype, with Jesus calling himself the bridegroom often enough. Meanwhile, the actual bridegroom is unnamed, yet the master of the feast goes up to him following the miracle and tells him, "You have kept the good wine unto now," which would seem to be Jesus is the bridegroom. Okay, now you're following me. You guys getting this? Yeah. And why is the master of the feast talking to the bridegroom about the supply of wine if Jesus was not the one who did the miracle unless they were one and the same? Fourth, if Jesus was understood as a rabbi, Jesus was called a rabbi. According to rabbinic tradition, we have that one was required to be married. Hence, Jesus, wouldn't he have to be married to start his 3 years of ministry if he's understood as a literal rabbi? Are you guys following that, right? So there's the only Jewish sect that said you should be celibate. They were the Essenes, right? Fifth, as for Mary Magdalene, the city of Cana was located precisely between Nazareth, where Jesus originated, and Magdala, where Mary originated. In fact, it was always a tradition, or often, you just meet in the city in between for these marriages. So many will say that Mary Magdalene is the one getting married to Jesus. Are you seeing the deduction? So this is, but then again, John 2:2 says Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. So people say, well, what about this? It says he's invited. Yeah, it's very interesting. He's invited, and then the whole concept is dropped. So a lot of scholars will say what's interpolated is that verse and women, what have you, that one. And they say those are the ones that somebody's fixing the text. Well, that one is absolutely shouldn't be there. I'll be the, go through the Greek for me, with me, and you see what I mean. So, was Jesus married? And was Jesus married to Mary Magdalene? Well, it seems to be a really big problem, especially for the Latin West. But for a while in the East, it wasn't that big a deal. It just wasn't, and we're going to go there in a little bit. But the origins for these ideas are found rooted in the New Testament. So it's not like these other texts are making things up ex nihilo, right? They're not making things up out of nowhere, out of cathonically, right? They are, there is something already in these texts that show that there is something going on. There is, you're waiting for the line. There's something about Mary. Okay, I need to stop. I'm getting too Mary. All right, so here it is. In fact, the thing is that according to the Third Ecumenical Council at Ephesus, Jesus was fully man and fully divine. And since he was fully man, he could have a wife according to the flesh. Was he some kind of phantom, a docetic idea? Is this good, right? Now we move on. We're at the Gospel of Thomas. Hey, there we go. You're going to like Mary better outside the Thomas school of thought. I'll just give you a head start. You're not going to like Thomas very well in this context. The Gospel of Thomas is interesting. Or I should say you're going to it's easy to misunderstand. So Mary Magdalene is there in the Gospel of Thomas. It's from the middle of the 1st century. There's a couple passages that mention her. And with Peter, okay, talking to Jesus, what happens is this. Simon Peter said to them, "Let Mary go forth from among us, for women are not worthy of life." I told you you're not going to like this. Okay, so Peter said to them, "Let Mary go forth from among us, for women are not worthy of life." Jesus responded, "Behold, I shall lead her, that I may make her male, in order that she also may become a living spirit like you males. For every woman who makes herself male shall enter into the kingdom of God. Okay, so already you're just going, what is that? You gotta be a man to be a Christian. What is this? Some kind of operation, or is it gonna be a change going on? Are you guys following me? Right? This okay. So this is not to be taken literal. I hope you understand that. I have some good news too. Later on, um, other Gnostic works will not use the word man; it will use the word humanity, as in people, because the word man can be misunderstood as the maleness. But this is so early on, and what happens is this: is that it's a concept that the Gnostics believe that the flesh is evil, right, and the flesh is going away, and so we don't want to increase the abundance of the flesh, and so therefore there's an emphasis upon virginity, you know, because this world is not our home. We are strangers in a strange place. We're transcending this plane. Are you following me? So that means is that Mary, women are supposed to stop their function as being mothers, and it's the idea of be a virgin. That's the idea. Be a virgin, be celibate, and even though your function as a woman, have children in this context. In this case, Mary is going to be a virgin from this perspective. So repress her femaleness is a way of doing it. The next section of the Gospel of Thomas is, I don't even want to break this one out. We'll just keep going. Mary asks Jesus, "Whom are your disciples like?" Jesus responds, "They are like children who have settled in a field which is not theirs. When the owner of the field comes, they will say, 'Let us have back our field.' They will undress in their presence in order to let them have back their field, and they give it back to them." Because I don't have a half an hour to try to go through what that it really does mean, let's just keep going on, right? So also the book of Thomas, the contender, when it comes to women, it says, "Woe to you who hope in the flesh and in the prison that will perish. Woe to you who love intimacy with womankind and polluted intercourse with it." So you're going to get the idea that the Thomas school, um, not when it comes to women, really problematic. That's the Gnostic Thomas school. Don't think all Gnostics think this way. Just like in Christianity, you have different denominations. Christian Gnostics, there's a whole bunch of groups of them too, quite a few. And so you can't say one is close to the other in many ways. Uh, Everybody has their own belief. The Gnosticism. Okay, so let's get into the Gospel of Mary. All right, here we go. Okay. Yes, there is a Gospel of Mary Magdalene. It does date from the 2nd century. It does have origins that go back to the 1st century. This is a very early text. It does show Mary in a position of leadership. So already by the 2nd century, she is viewed as a leader. She is, of course, said to have witnessed the resurrection of Jesus. And so this is, of course, goes well with Matthew and the Mark and the John account, right? But she was also, in addition, privy to a special vision from him as well. So she received a special vision. And what happens is there's this dialogue between Jesus and Mary. Well, actually, they talk. And what happens is that Jesus instructs Mary. And then Mary is depicted as the leader who instructs the rest of the disciples. So she's not only the apostle of the apostles, she's the teacher of the apostles. She's the one who's going to give them the true vision as an authority figure. So the story goes that Mary is ready to tell her vision to the disciples, and she wanted to comfort them. For I'm reading it actually. For Jesus ascended into heaven, saying things that they could not understand. So Mary could understand it, but these disciples, including Peter, just didn't. They couldn't understand it. But to which Mary claimed to comprehend because of her sacred revelation of Jesus. As he left them, Jesus instructed, acquire my peace within yourselves. Be on your guard so that no one deceives you by saying, look over here or look over there. For the child of true humanity, right, exists within you. Follow it. Those who search for it will find it. So, hey, what a relief. They will get rid of the word man. And now it's humanity, right? Now, of course, what he's referring to, this idea of look over here or look over there, the reference is the Christian belief that Jesus is returning again in the material world. So, so he's talking to people who believe that Jesus will return to the material world, and what Jesus is trying to say is he's going to return in the spiritual world, but he's also going to. We are supposed to follow the archetypal human that's created in perfection, which is the reflection of the deity. So the idea is that we become Christ-like. We follow the image of Christ, and that will become a resurrection to ourselves. Does that make sense? In a spiritual sense. Okay, well, then after this, uh, except for Mary, all the apostles became distressed and wept when they heard Christ's words. So Mary, um, I'm going to quote this, tenderly kissed them all. So Mary, she's pretty tender. So she's tenderly kissed them all the disciples. She's going to give them a kiss because they're crying. Uh, where do you see this? Papyrus Oxyroticus 3525. Okay, I believe you now. Yes. Yeah. So Mary kisses them, and then it's a loving kiss as brothers and sisters in Christ. And now we have Peter. All right, we're setting up old Peter. Peter asked Mary Magdalene to reveal what she heard from Christ. Okay, so Peter is getting ready, and here starts the challenge. Right? The challenge. And says, Sister, we know that the Savior loved you more than the rest of women. Okay. Now he says more than the rest of women. You want to remember that for later on. Okay. So as opposed to, men, Jesus loved you amongst just the women. Don't worry. You'll like this later on. So tell us the words of the Savior, which you remember, which you know, but we do not, and nor have we heard. So, so he's kind of stressing that men are a measure above women. This is the Peter school. Remember the Peter and Paul school? Remember the Gentile school? Remember the Western Christianity school? Remember the Latin Christianity school? That's it right there. Mary answered and said, what is hidden from you, I will proclaim to you. And she began to speak to them these words. She said, I saw the Lord in a vision, and I said to him, Lord, I saw you today in a vision. He answered me, how wonderful you are for not wavering at seeing me, not wavering at seeing me. For where the mind is, there is the treasure. Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, wavering as opposed to who? The rest of them, they're all wavering. So she's not wavering. And so the vision begins with Mary asking, so now, Lord, does a person who sees a vision see it with the soul or with the spirit? Jesus responds, a person does not see with the soul or with the spirit, rather the mind, which exists between the two. That sees the vision. So what happens is the hierarchy is you got spirit, mind, soul, and body. Okay? Spirit, mind, soul, and body. Now, in the Western church, And in the Western, a lot of times, it is soul, spirit, and body. Got it? So the West is soul, spirit, and body. Who says so? Tertullian says so. Tertullian, in fact, says that the soul acts as the ruling faculty, and the body is both part of the human's physical nature as well as being controlled by the soul. Of course, the spirit is above it. Also, Tertullian and Western Christians believe the soul possessed actual gender. The soul possessed actual gender, a real sex, stating the soul being sown in the womb simultaneously with the flesh is allotted its sex simultaneous with the flesh, such that neither substance controls the cause of the flesh. De Anima 36:2. As a result, in the West, they believed the soul at birth is gendered as male or female, is gendered as male and female. Guess what? Gospel of Mary doesn't see it that way. In the Gospel of Mary, the flesh, the body, that's the only place where gender and sex is. Are you guys getting this? Gender and sex is in the body. So I want you to follow this, okay? So, Gospel of Mary, spirit, mind, soul, body is connected to gender. In the Latin West, spirit, soul connected with gender, and then body. So therefore, when your soul goes with your spirit, right, it's still gendered, right? And you're stuck whatever gender you are, even in an afterlife context. Are you guys waking up with this? But according to this Mary tradition, it doesn't matter, male or female. It's irrelevant in a spiritual sense. Isn't that cool? Yeah. And it just, you leave your gender behind with your fleshly body. Okay. You can see why the emancipation this kind of idea is in and of itself. Yeah, it's great. Gospel of Mary. Nobody ever reads it anymore. So we're not done anymore. So what happens is that now you're going to have Mary going through basically or moving up, taking the journey through the various levels. So we lost part of the section, but basically the Gospel of Mary talks about the soul, how it passes upward through the 7 powers of wrath called darkness and desire and ignorance and zeal for death and realm of the flesh and foolish wisdom of the flesh and wisdom of the wrathful person. And in fact, when the soul reaches the 2nd power, desire, for example, the Lord Guardian states, I did not see you go down, yet now I see you going up. So why do you lie since you belong to me? The soul responds, I saw you. You did not see me, nor did you know me. You mistook the garment I wore. You mistook the garment I wore for my true self, and you did not recognize me. And of course, when the soul reaches ignorance, it states, where are you going? You are bound by my wickedness. Indeed, you are bound. The soul responds, why do you judge me, since I have not passed judgment? I have been bound, but I have not been bound by anything. They did not recognize me, but I have recognized that the universe is to be dissolved, both the things of the earth and the things of heaven. So they're going through the various levels. This is very interesting, kind of going through into the afterlife. Here we go. I want to keep going. Here we go. Following the description of her vision, which, by the way, we don't have the whole thing, Mary said these things. She fell silent. But this revelation now goes challenged. First, Andrew's connected to Peter. Andrew attempts to refute her. Andrew is made to state, say that you will about things that she said, but I don't believe the Savior said these things, for indeed these teachings are strange ideas. The Apostle Peter now joins in with Andrew and says, did he then speak secretly with a woman in preference to us and not openly? Are we to turn back and all listened to her? Did he prefer her to us? Wow. When I told you there's a conflict between them, I'm not exaggerating. Are you getting that? So what does Mary say? I love this. This is so good. This should be a movie. All right. Mary looks to the apostle Peter. Then Mary grieved and said to Peter, my brother Peter, what do you think? Do you think that I thought this up myself in my heart, or that I am a lying concerning the Savior? And then it gets even better. At this point, Levi comes before them. Levi is oftentimes understood as the author's point of view. So whoever wrote the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, it's Levi. Levi, of course, sometimes connected to a tax gatherer, sometimes Matthew, sometimes not. It depends. But Levi is still Jewish Christianity. Most scholars, including Karen King and others, say that this is Jewish Christianity. So Peter represents Gentile Christianity. He represents the established church. But Levi and Mary Magdalene are Jewish Christianity. Is this good? Here, Levi says, Peter, you have always been a wrathful person. Okay. Now I see you contending against the woman like the adversaries. The adversaries see above. Remember the vision? Yeah, those are adversaries. So basically, you're like the devils, But if the Savior made her worthy, who are you to reject her? Surely the Savior knew her very well. For this reason, he loved her more than us. Okay. Whoa, wait. Remember before? They're saying, hey, Peter's saying, that Jesus loved, of all the women folk, Mary most of all. Here we have Levi saying, oh, Jesus loved her more than all of us, male and female included. Okay, is this good? Is this helpful? Okay, and so what will happen is Levi then states, rather we should be ashamed. We should clothe ourselves with the perfect human, aspire it for ourselves as he commanded us, and announce the good news, not laying down any other rule or law that differs from what the Savior had said. So there you have it. So there. Next, gospel. The first apocalypse of James, another second century work. We only have fragments of it. It does mention Mary in it, and James is supposedly persuaded by Mary as well as Martha. They're in the authoritative position, but we only have fragments of it. The next work is called the Dialogue of the Savior. Mary Magdalene is presented in a conversation with Jesus. This is from the 2nd into the 3rd century. Matthew and Thomas are there. But it's interesting is that at one point, Mary's question so delights Jesus that he states, you make clear the abundance of the revealer. And so you have this conversation. And of course, in many ways, a positive one. Now, there is a controversial aspect in the dialogue of the Savior, where Jesus was said to have said, pray in the place where there is no women, to which Matthew reports, pray in the place here where there is no women. He says, and destroy the works of womankind, and because there is any matter of birth, because they will cease giving birth. And of course, this makes sense. We're back to the Gospel of Thomas idea about women being virgins and not being mothers. So it's the same kind of idea. In the Pistis Sophia, it's another work. I mentioned Mary Magdalene. I'm saying all this because you're realizing, wow, Mary Magdalene's talked about a lot in early Christianity. She sure is. The Pistis Sophia, it's interesting. Basically, the disciples of Mary Magdalene are asking Jesus questions, and they asked a total of 64 questions, and Mary Magdalene asks 39 of the 64 questions. 39 of them. So most of the questions, she is the one. And by the way, um, uh, Jesus includes Mary Magdalene as amongst the other disciples when he declares, I have given you authority over all things as children of light. In the Gospel of Philip, we want to go here. The Gospel of Philip goes further. It is, of course, connected to Mary Magdalene. The mother of Jesus and her sister are also mentioned in here, but they call her Magdalene, the one who was called his companion. Again, we're back, so the second into the third century. Companion. Why are they calling Mary his companion? All the others are not mentioning companion. I'll say Peter the companion, Matthew the companion, but she is the companion. Well, okay, and in fact, Jesus says, Mary, thou blessed one, whom I will perfect in all mysteries of those of the heights, discourse and openness, thou whose heart is raised to the kingdom of heaven more than all thy brethren. Once again, she's number one. In fact, what I think is interesting here is that the word koinos, basically in Coptic, Greek, koinos is Greek, means sharer or partner. It means it can be used in the capacity of a partner. It can also be used in the capacity of, yes, a wife. Yeah, it could be a designation for a wife. It is used in Greek for a wife. so, and by the way, this is not the only time that people think that Mary is the wife of Jesus. We're going to see this a lot, right? We even get this with the Cathars later on, So this is a common belief. Now, what will happen is there is a kissing passage. Oh yeah, it says Mary Magdalene. She is the one the Savior loved more than all the disciples, and used to kiss her often. ... The rest of the disciples were offended by it and expressed disapproval. Wait, what happened? Wait, what happened? Wait, what was that? A worm ate that last worm. We don't know what happened. So what happened is that it says that kissed her off, used to kiss her often, and we're missing the direct object. So was it kissed her often on the cheek? Kissed her often on the mouth? Kissed her, let the imagination go wild. There's some kissing going on. So this companionship seems to be really stressed in this particular work. Are you guys okay? I told you this would be interesting, and we're going places. And I love it because it's really in the text, right? Mary Magdalene here is also connected with the idea of being the Sophia in the Gospel of Philip. So, which of course, according to Gnostic cosmology, the mother of the material universe, the one who birthed the lower powers, and so that whatever she brought forth was by definition barren of true life. But Mary Magdalene, like Sophia, was viewed as barren in this way. But then she changed when she went under the companionship of the Savior, Jesus. And so then she became fruitful, right? And so Jesus and Sophia are then partners, maybe a spiritual brother and sister, or maybe a spiritual husband and wife. I did with her. Okay, so now we have Hippolytus. This is a Orthodox, I should say, a Catholic saint. He's Orthodox in his beliefs. It goes on as follows. He talks about how, discusses how Jesus told the women, both Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Mary Magdalene, to report that he was risen, and then goes on to say how he then upbraided them for not believing the women's report. In fact, he was upset So wait, what's going on there? This is coming from a Catholic source. So the fact that Mary Magdalene is not being believed by the disciples is not just a Gnostic tradition, it's Catholic Church tradition. Whoa. The Irenaeus to Hippolytus. Are you guys having fun yet? All right. Well, with the Greek Orthodox, they always saw, they read the Greek, right? So they always saw Mary and Magdalene in the heightened position. They declared her the equal to the apostles quite often in Greek, along with Thecla. In fact, you know the story of the seven demons? The Orthodox tradition, they said that Mary Magdalene was so virtuous that Satan decided that maybe God planned to impregnate Mary Magdalene with Christ. And so the devil, Satan, didn't want that to happen. And that's why he tortured her with these seven demons, because, you know, he didn't want this to happen. And it was kind of bait and switch, where then obviously God chose Mary, who becomes the mother of Jesus. Does that make sense? So you have that within the Catholic tradition. Okay, so well, what about Mary as a repentant prostitute? Where do we get that from? Well, it's made up. it's okay. So here we go. We're going to go through it. So how this works? This is the Latin West, right? How this works is a misreading of a few passages. First of all, they misread a passage in the Gospel of Luke. The Gospel of Luke talks about how one of the Pharisees asked him to eat with Jesus, and he went to the Pharisee's house, he reclined at the table, and there is a woman of the city who was a sinner, and when she learned that he was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster flask of ointment, and standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears and wiped them with the hair of her head. And of course, there's this long conversation that goes on. Well, what happens is there's another Mary. There's a Mary of Bethany. Mary of Bethany in the Gospel of John. And it talks about 6 days before Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here, a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was amongst those reclining at the table. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume, and she poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And of course, the house is filled with fragrance and so forth. So there you have it. Well, what happens is that the papacy puts these two stories together. They make the woman, okay, you got this, the woman who is connected to this ointment, who washes Jesus' feet, who is maybe this prostitute, the sinner. They go, wait, they go, oh wait, this is the same one as Mary of Bethany, because there's the same activity. So, this unnamed person, the sinner, has a name. It's Mary. So it's got to be Mary Magdalene. You're going, they're not that dumb, are they? They are that dumb. It's worse. So then what happens is they take a look, they combine Luke 7:36 to 50 with Mary of Bethany of John 12:1 through 8, because after all, her name was Mary, and so it must be Mary Magdalene who cast out the seven demons. And they're saying, okay, wait a second. Mary Magdalene with the seven demons cast out, that's Luke chapter 7. Luke chapter 8 is the woman who's crying. And we know that, we connect that with Mary, Bethany, and John, and voila. They're the same. You're going, no, nobody thinks that way. Nobody thinks that way. So he puts chapter 7 of Luke and chapter 8 with Luke and says they're all the same person, and then mixes that with Bethany. And you're thinking, this can't get worse. Yes, his name is Gregory. Gregory the First. That's right. That's his name. He's the one who messed it up. He did so in year 591 CE. 591 CE. In fact, I'm going to read him saying it. Don't believe me, believe Gregory. Here he goes. She whom Luke calls the sinful woman, whom John calls Mary, we believe to be the Mary from whom the 7 devils were ejected, according to Mark. And what did these 7 devils signify, if not all the vices? It is clear, brothers, that the woman previously used the unguent to perfume her flesh in forbidden acts. What she therefore displayed more scandalously, she is now offered to God in a more praiseworthy manner, etc., etc., ad nauseam. Are you guys getting this? So you just heard him saying that. So there's no, she's not a prostitute. I hope I destroyed that point. Oh, but there's another tradition. What? They also conflate her with a fourth person. There's a lady called Mary of Egypt. She doesn't even live near that time. She lives between 344 to 421, which is 3 centuries after the New Testament. In this story, Mary ran away from her home at the age of 12 to Alexandria, Egypt, and she became a prostitute. This is where we get the word prostitute into the line. That her job as a prostitute. Apparently, she enjoyed her occupation so much that she worked for free at times. She did her services for free, driven by insatiable and irrepressible passion. Eventually, she got tired of prostitution in Alexandria. She went to Jerusalem. She was about to enter the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and an invisible force held her back. She felt ashamed, and she converted, and there you have it. Okay, so let's take a look at art. The earliest images of Mary Magdalene date back to the 5th century. One found in Ravenna, and the other in the Rubula text. By the way, the 6th century image of Mary Magdalene is at Ravenna, but that's dominated by Eastern Christian thought. So that means that Mary is looked as something as amazing, you know. So though I've actually seen this in Ravenna. There's an image of her at the tomb. This is at the San Apollinaire Nova in Ravenna, and it shows Mary Magdalene. Get this: she's wearing purple robes, and her arms are stretched out, standing before a tomb ornamented with 4 pillars. And so she is in she's a position of power. In the Rubula Gospels, again, more of the Greek East, she is depicted again in a powerful position, making a gesture in one case called the Kerete, which is basically hail greeting. Again, showing that she is a gesture showing leadership. That's good. Okay, so Mary's doing really well. You know, ideas of Mary as exalted does leak into the West. You got those called the Bogomils, who kind of have a dualistic perspective, almost like Zoroastrian in certain ways, Manichaeism in other ways. And these Bogomils influence a group from the Albigensians, and then of course the Cathars, right? And they bring with them these views of a heightened Mary Magdalene. And of course, the Cathars, they believe in a good God, viewed as the God of love and dwelling, and of course, obviously the Rex Mundi, the king of the world, which is, of course, of the material realm. When they look at Jesus, this material realm, matter itself, was evil. The Cathars either flat out denied Jesus could in any way participate with the material world and still be called Son of God, or they held that he was no different from any other man who has ever lived. In short, Jesus either died as a flesh and blood human on the cross, or he was a spirit in possession of a phantom body that could not suffer the indignity of crucifixion. So what does this have to do with Mary? Well, within Jesus as a human version, we have, of course, Cistercian Pierre Divo de Soleil mentions recording the massacre of Béziers, the description of Cathars and Waldensians. He mentions that they had strange doctrines regarding Mary Magdalene. In fact, of course, the Fairbank feast day was on July 22nd. And what happened is that he said that Mary Magdalene was the concubine of Jesus Christ. That he believed that Mary Magdalene was the concubine of Jesus Christ. We also have another work that also mentions this. And then we have a second account, or third account, I should say, an exposition of the Albigen heresies. It's connected to Esmar de Béziers. It claims that once again, the Cathars taught in their secret meetings that Mary Magdalene, in this case, was the wife of Jesus Christ. So you have mention of Jesus as a wife in Cathar documents. Well, you're going to see where they're getting it from, because I just quoted all those earlier sources. So obviously, when they're seeing this idea of companion, people are saying wife, wife. All right, so now, right? So Jesus had a concubine. That's just so wrong. Somebody says, yeah. Well, so one Frenchman says it's a concubine, and the other says it's a wife. So if you go for Pierre, it's a concubine, right? Uh, so, but if you're looking at Urban Béziers, then it's a wife. Well, now we have another tradition, and that is that Mary goes to France. Because I started 10 minutes late, you're going to give me some grace, and I'll finish at 9:40. That's okay. Or I'll choke on water and end out. He's like, and Dr. Reed felt drowned. Okay. I actually wrote an article on this, the arrival of Mary in France, Mary Magdalene, the reported argument, I believe. I actually titled it "Mary, Mary, quite contrary." The Church of Santa Maria de la Mar. Okay, so legends have Mary going to Provence. So he leaves Jerusalem, arrives in southern France, and so and arrives at Saint Marie de la Mar. And of course, I've been there, loved it, beautiful little French village. And of course, who else arrived? Sometimes they have the contingency being they have Mary Jacobi, the mother of James and the sister of the Virgin Mary, Mary Salome, the mother of the Apostle James Major and John, and Mary Magdalene and Martha. Sometimes they even throw in Lazarus. Why not? So and what happens is Mary Magdalene, after she arrives in Santa Maria de la Mar, she continues on to Saint Bon, and to the sanctuary of Mary Magdalene that is there. It's a mountainous cave about 25 miles from Saint Maximin. It takes about 90 minutes to walk to. So you got through this forest, and then you see this cliff house, and there it is. And supposedly, Mary spent the rest of her life in this cave, and the cave, uh, does seem to date from the time of John Cassian, but whatever. Dominicans have been in charge of it since 1295. So that's basically, the story. Now, what happens is that the story of Mary coming to south of France, we have mention of it in the 13th century. Dominican scholar Jacobus de Vorena, he collected local French stories of saints into a collection known as the Golden Legend. And it tells the story of how she goes to this cave after she arrives in France. and she lives here for 30 years. And the only food that she had happened to be supplied by angels. And then she's visited by angels 7 times a day, and she's always in this sense of angelic ecstasy. And then she dies. But there's also mention amongst them, amongst this group that goes to the south of France, a certain Sarah. And this is where we get into the Da Vinci Code ideas, right? So Sarah, who is Sarah? There are a few theories of who Sarah is. One story of Sarah is that she is the humble servant of the two Marys, not Mary Magdalene, but the other Marys, and so that's kind of it. And sometimes though they have her as a servant of Mary Magdalene. Second story asserts that she's an Egyptian by birth because of her swarthy complexion, and that she is a servant. So we have that. The third story actually associates her with obscure Persian martyrs. The fourth version of the story is connected to the Gypsies, where she is a powerful pagan queen residing near the Rhone River. And when the Marys arrive in their boat, Sarah proudly taunts them. In response, one of the Marys steps out of the boat and directly upon the rough waters, inviting the queen to do the same. Not to be outdone, Sarah attempts to do just that and nearly drowns in the process. When the other Mary rescues her, Sarah, humbled, admits defeat and converts to Christianity. And so in this form, she is the patron saint of gypsies. The fifth and final version is a Da Vinci Code version. And you know you want me to talk about it. And that is that Sarah is the daughter of Mary Magdalene and Jesus. That Sarah is the daughter of Mary Magdalene and Jesus. So where do you get this idea? Of course, you have Dan Brown. He has Professor Teabing assert that according to the Priory of Sion, Mary Magdalene was pregnant at the time of the crucifixion. For the safety of Christ's unborn child, she had no choice but to flee the Holy Land. With the help of Jesus' trusted uncle, Joseph of Arimathea, Mary Magdalene secretly traveled to France, then known as Gaul. Then she found safe refuge in the Jewish community. It was here in France that she gave birth to a daughter. Her name was Sarah. Okay. Well, other than Dan Brown, the authority of Dan Brown, where else do we get this idea? Well, Margaret Starboard, I've talked to her before. Actually, we're friends, and I've interviewed her before and so forth. She says a possible connection is a Christian carpet that was discovered in the Himalayas. It was radiocarbon dated to 150 to 180 CE. It has looks like the Cairo, the Chi, with the mark of the X on it. And you have a central figure that's interpreted as Jesus, and he's flanked by a blonde lady on the left and a young girl on his right. And so she identifies that this blonde lady on the left is Mary Magdalene, and the one on the right is Sarah. Mysteriously, both of their heads are depicted riding within two boats. And so they're saying, well, so this means that there is travel involved, maybe to the south of France. You also have folklorist Kathleen McGowan, who collected oral traditions throughout this region of the southern region of France here. And these stories relate how the bloodline of Jesus survived in France via Mary Magdalene. And that according to this oral tradition, as well as these other traditions, it entered into the Merovingian line of kings. Now we go into the Merovingian line, and the idea is the word Holy Grail. You take a look at the idea is that the Holy Grail, of course, is that the story goes that Mary, she stood at the foot of the cross, and she gathered the blood of Christ, and then brought this jar containing the blood of Christ to southern France. So there's that. They're saying that she brought the Holy Grail to France. Other people say, no. She is the Holy Grail. Her body is the Holy Grail. Because if you look at the word is spelled Sangraal, Sangraal. And of course, the word son and then graal means holy cup, right? But if you go song, S-A-N-G, ral, song ral, it means in Old French royal blood. See, so san graal, S-A-N-G-R-A-A-L. So S-A-N, next word, G-R-A-A-L means holy cup, but S-A-N-G, next word, R-A-A-L means royal blood. And they say, well, this connects to the Merovingians later on. Well, how do you know? Because according to those records, it says the first king was born from a liaison between his mother and a sea creature. And so he was part man and part fish. From this, of course, Starboard says, well, this is ichthus. And so this represents the idea of the union, the idea of fish. Jesus as the fish unites with the woman. And so therefore, this is Christ and the woman together. And that is, of course, obviously, the father of the Merovingian king, Childeric I. And so this is where this lineage of Jesus comes from, right? Comes from, goes all the way from Jesus, and of course, then from there to, Mary and then Sarah, and then eventually skips all the way to the Merovingian king, Childeric. And so you have these people today. They're all, kind of all boastful. They're like, hey, I'm from the line of Jesus. They usually are sitting in front of a book of, like, a library of books behind them. It's like, I'm from the line of Jesus. They're very proud of it. Well, guess what? Doesn't mean anything. But if we just say, play the game. Let's pretend that this is true. Well, let's see. Did you guys know that the Childeric's line, the Merovingians connect to the Carolingians, and the Carolingians go all the way to Charlemagne? Well, guess what? I'm related to Charlemagne on 3 different lines. 1, 2, 3. So guess what? Hey, I'm related to Jesus. Hi, and so is Terry's husband, Lauren. We're both of the line of Jesus. Hey, we should have like the Carolingians got around. So that would be a big family reunion. Okay, sorry, I got to keep going. So it doesn't mean anything. Okay, so let's go into other parts of France. I do want to finish France because I want to give you the zinger at the very end. Okay, is that we take a look at official messages, and of course, we take a look and we realize that I'm skipping sections here. Is that where's Mary buried? That's where we're going to end. So the last topic today. As soon as I finish this topic, we're over. But let's go there. Where is Mary buried? Well, of course, there's in France. There's a few versions. You have Vizelet. Vizelet. By the way, I wrote an article on this. Another one that was published. It's called the merry-go-round. My bad titles for these articles. Okay, is it Vizelet or Saint Maximin? So what happens is Vizelet was considered one of the sites. It was dedicated to Mary Magdalene. I've been to Vizelet. Of course, I've been there. Beautiful church. But it was, according to the sources, it was brought from Burgundy to Vizelet in Burgundy, from Provence, and from the small town of Saint Maximin. So it comes from Saint Maximin, which is near where the cave is, right? It's about 25 kilometers from the cave where Mary spent the last, 30 or some years of her life, right? So Saint Maximin said that the body is brought from Saint Maximin to Vizelet. And then, of course, later on, it will be brought from Vizelet back to Saint Maximin. Well, let's go into the context. According to Vizelet, the story goes is that a monk by the name of Magdalene was dispatched to Saint Maximin to fetch the relics of Mary Magdalene, and he brought them to Vizelet for safekeeping. So safekeeping from who? The Saracens, because the Muslims are now attacking the south of France, and so it is believed that it needs to be protected. So it's brought further north into Burgundy. We now know that in the year 1037, it is said that Abbot Geoffrey, amidst a great crowd gathered for feast day celebration, suddenly displayed the relics of Mary Magdalene. And this, of course, revelation was accompanied by various miracles. Yet the first documented reference to Vézelay in relation to Mary Magdalene, that's contemporaneous, as opposed to saying this happened before, was the papal bull that was issued by Leo IX on April 27th, 1050. And she's listed as one of the most important patrons. And so the bones are presumed to be under the altar there. And so what will happen is everybody will make pilgrimages to Vézelay. In fact, on April 24th, 1267, St. Louis had the remains of Mary Magdalene exhumed at a great ceremony, but they did not find an entire skeleton. They just found a few bones. Still, they put these bones in a new reliquary. Well, St. Louis was convinced that these are the bones, but Charles II, Anjou, then 19 years of the age, was not convinced, and he was convinced that the remains were still in Provence. They were still back at the Church of Saint Maximin. And so what happened is that what he did is he went there and ordered the crypt to be explored, and they found this first century sarcophagus, and they opened it up, and there's this fragrant scent that came out of it, and they found an entire female skeleton, save one leg, and they put the skull in a golden reliquary, and so they say the head of Mary Magdalene is there, and I've seen it. And they say, yep, this is where Mary Magdalene is. So this is where we're going to stop, right here. One more sentence, or one more bit. I know another story. Mary Magdalene, here. When it comes to Mary Magdalene being buried in France, okay, the earliest, of course, those who chronicle this is his name is Sigebert of Gimblou. He lived from 1030 to 1112. He asserts the relics of Mary Magdalene. He's the one that later were moved further north to Vézelay in the year 745 because of the Saracen threat. He's the one who mentioned it. But he's writing in the 10 into the 1100s, okay, from France. So what did people in France believe before that time? Here we go. Drum roll. I'm going to give you some very important information. It'll be worth it. Trust me. Where is Mary Magdalene buried? According to Gregory of Tours and Willibald, Bishop of Eichstätt, she's not buried in France. Why does that matter? They're Franks. They're writing in France. Oh, when? One in the 500s and one in the 700s. Is this interesting? So where do they say? Well, Gregory of Tours, he is an authority. He is the authority on the Merovingians. He doesn't mention any connection. No Da Vinci connection at all, right? And he writes about Mary Magdalene. And what he says in his De Gloria Martyrium, he declares, it is in this town that Mary Magdalene rests, with nothing to cover her. And which town does he define? He says the city of Ephesus. What? Mary Magdalene's buried in Ephesus. In fact, he mentioned that there's an open oratory there. Willibald, who's a relative, most likely of St. Boniface himself, was Bishop of Eichstätt in the region of Franconia. He was active during the time of Charles Martel. And you know what is he, and so what does he do? Well, he was on a pilgrimage in 721 to the Holy Land. He left the Isle of Samos, and he made a special trip to another pilgrimage site in order to visit the tomb of, guess what? Mary Magdalene. He went to Ephesus. In fact, he visited Mary Magdalene's tomb at Ephesus, and also the mysterious grave of the Apostle John, and around the seven sleepers. Wait. Also, we have Mary Magdalene's life and death at Ephesus was common knowledge in the East. When Jesus died, he said to Mary, to John, it's going to be, behold your mother. And so wherever the Apostle John went, Mary, Mother of God, went. But many early Christians believed that Mary Magdalene also went with them. And according to early Christian tradition, where does John end up? At the city of Ephesus. And so Mary Magdalene then, as well as Mary, the Mother of God, end up in Ephesus. And this is the earliest viewpoint. So if we're going strictly chronologically, the earliest view, even from people in France, is Mary didn't get to France, or if she did, maybe she came back, but Mary was buried in Ephesus. In fact, we even have Modestus, Patriarch of Jerusalem, from 630 to 634. He asserts, after the death of our Lord, the Mother of God, and Mary Magdalene joined John, the well-beloved disciple, at Ephesus. It is there that the Miraphor ended her apostolic career through her martyrdom. In fact, Modestus calls her chief of the women disciples. But what happened, though, is Mary Magdalene, her body is moved by the Emperor Leo VI in the year 899 to Constantinople, and is buried beside the body of Lazarus, because they got things kind of confused, in a monastery by the Bosphorus. However, people still kept going to the tomb of Mary Magdalene at Ephesus, right? And in fact, we have a Russian abbot, Daniel. He arrived in 1106, and he went there and visited as well to the site. And does anybody know where it is? And of course, I do. Yeah, it's at the tomb of the seven sleepers. It's at the tomb of the seven sleepers. And in fact, if we read the texts, it seems to be a tomb either just outside or just within the entrance of the cave complex. And that is where Mary Magdalene first laid to rest before going to Constantinople. Although when the Russian arrived, he showed a skull of Mary. So I don't know, maybe parts got back. But, just to be on the safe side, I decided that because I've spent a lot of times in Ephesus. I used to take breaks, enjoying being involved with archaeology. I used to take some breaks in Ephesus, and what I used to do is they have all these peach trees, fresh peaches. You just take them right off the trees, and you take a bite, and juice goes everywhere. And so what I like to do is really hot. Is I take these peaches and I crawl into one of these tombs, at the tomb of the seven sleepers. It's nice and cool in there. And I sit and eat these peaches. I made sure that I had peaches inside most of the tombs. So that means supposedly when Mary Magdalene arrested, you can picture Dr. Refill sitting there centuries later eating peaches. You guys enjoy it, right? So that is the legacy of Mary Magdalene. You probably learn more than you should, but you now know all the various versions and traditions. And I will now complete my talk and go merrily on my way. There we go. You guys like this? Was this good?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, I think I hopefully answered all your questions, right? Oh, it gets complicated with Mary.
Answered many and caused many more to be asked.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, could she come to the south of France? Maybe, why not? Maybe she went to France and visited and sailed back. The problem is the traditions from France, say Ephesus, earlier on. And only later does it become in France. So that's why it becomes problematic. That. But,
You
yeah.
really went to Ephesus?
So here's the question. Did you really go to Ephesus? Now, I don't know.
I go every day.
Maybe she died in Jerusalem, or people say maybe she never existed. I wouldn't say that. But what I'm trying to say is that if you go by the earliest testimony, well, I know for a fact that at least one of the Johns for sure went to Ephesus and did die there. The traditions are way too early because, John, he lived to the time of the Emperor Trajan, and at least one of the Johns, right, connected to the Johannine tradition. And of course, Trajan's reign begins in 98 CE. Well, guess what? You already have Irenaeus claiming that John was there in the mid 2nd century. Within 60, 70 years, they're already saying he's there. It's pretty close in time. And also, you're going to have Clement of Alexandria. Also around the same time will say the same thing. And have other early traditions. So, he lived all the way to the very end of the 2nd century, and already mid next century, it's common knowledge. So it's highly likely that John got there. And we do know that Mary Magdalene, as you read, is very close to the Johannine tradition. Very close to the Johannine tradition. And so it would be natural for Mary Magdalene to go with John. So it is, if John leaves, it would make sense that Mary would go with him, especially since they were part of the crowd before the cross, right? It was John, all the other apostles just ran off. John was there. And then, of course, the 3 women, including, of course, Mary Magdalene. And then, of course, again, where Jesus says, behold your mother to John, it says from that day forth, that was basically the family of John's now adopted as part of the family. You would think that Mary would go along. Now it gets more interesting because if Mary is the wife of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, they would just be, Mary Magdalene would just go with her in-laws. Just part of the family, family outing. So I kind of have a feeling that Mary Magdalene got to Ephesus because we got too many sources for it. We just have too many. So, but I know that makes problematic the Mary in France because it's such a romantic idea. I love these places. I love Saint Maximin and Vézelay and I love Santa Maria de la Mar. Now you could have something else that's going on, and I'll throw this one out for free. You could have the revelation of these bones. One of the big ones happens in the 1200s. Why am I saying that? This is my way around this. And that is that, well, you have the Fourth Crusade, that sacks Constantinople in 1204. Maybe they took the bones of Mary Magdalene from the monastery along the Bosphorus, and then they brought that to France.
Oh, okay.
Even though we have a record of showing the bones earlier, we do, but you still have that was buried. Then they had another reliquary. They wanted to redo the whole thing, and maybe that's what happened. Or because of Anjou, right? Maybe Charles Anjou got those bones away from Vézelay, and he favored Saint Maximin, which was the original tradition. So he's the one who kind of set things up to change the story. So there's lots of possible. Maybe the bones did get there. I don't know. but because we don't have the bones in the East anymore. So unfortunately, the 1204 was a terrible time. It's Any other questions, or was that, or I'm just not just meandering?
No. Your meandering is always fascinating. Okay, so now the Eastern Orthodox Church
Yeah.
does not have the same problem with misogyny that the Romans had. What kind of a tradition does the Eastern Orthodox Church have about Mary Magdalene?
Mary Magdalene is the foremost one of the apostle of the apostles. She is highly respected and beloved. She is not the Mary, the prostitute. She is connected um, with the with ointment, but having no connection to the hair story, the prostitution story. So there is a jar that's connected with her, but that has nothing to do with that other tradition. That makes sense. So you have, in fact, I think I probably just rolled by and skipped that whole section there, which is of course typical of me. Um, yeah, no. Oh, yeah, she's declared as um, Is Apostolos. That's her title. Is Apostolos. Is Apostolos means equal to the apostles. So her designation officially in Greek is that she is the one who is equal to the apostle. That's pretty great.
Yeah.
So she has, and remember I said before that the seven demon story.
Mhm.
It's because the Eastern Orthodox think that she is so worthy that God was thinking about saying the Holy Spirit and impregnating Mary Magdalene with Jesus. And the devil got hold of this idea, did not like it very much, and sent these demons after her. And so then, then God was doing like kind of bait and switch thing, and decided upon. Well, no, really, what I was going for was Mary, the Mother of God, all along. So that is it. I think there's other kind of sources here.
Okay, but they're not wife of Jesus or concubine of Jesus or anything.
No. Here it is. She's depicted holding the ointment bottle. Oh yeah, the ointment bottle is representing the ointments that she put on Jesus's body. So in the tomb. But the idea, though, however, of Mary being the wife does not survive in the East. Well, the idea that does survive, because you see the Gnostic tradition, even you have these Marys, and you're thinking in some cases there seems to be an actual husband-wife kind of relationship, and then you see this really deep spiritual relationship, brother sister, or that kind of going on, and so that she's a perpetual virgin. She is like a nun, right? She is promised to Christ. That's the tradition. That's what that will survive in the Eastern Church. Is
Okay.
a heightened aspect. So it will still be Mary Magdalene, yay! So you have those who are Eastern Orthodox Church, and they go into they see these Renaissance paintings, of Mary with the red hair and as the harlot. They go, what in the world have they done to this woman? She's a saint. She's equal to the apostles. What are you doing? you know, and I'm sorry, but Gregory really messed up. There's a few other words I could say, and I had to read to you his own words to see how awful it is. How you do this? They're supposed to be trained in hermeneutics. They should know how to read the Bible, and how he put that together. I mean, it hurts my brain to even come up with that idea, because he's like working so hard to make her the prostitute that he has to throw in 4 stories. You don't even get the prostitute until you get Mary of Egypt. She's just a sinner. You gotta throw Mary from Egypt in there. So, it was later on, 4th century, you make her into something that's a prostitute, You can see his sermons like, oh, terrible women, awful, awful. This is the Latin West. I'm sorry. This is part of that. But when we get to the East, it's like, no, you don't do this improper. But the real question is, who was the real Mary?
Yeah, there's a lot of, it seems like every other woman in the New Testament is named Mary. Was Mary that common a name?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We go through this, don't we? We do
Just like
this in the
Chelsea.
United States. You just,
Every other girl's named Chelsea.
Chelsea, it used to be everybody's named John,
Yeah.
Jim. Hey, I'm James. Say that,
There are no pearls anymore.
Huh?
There's no pearls anymore.
No pearls. No.
Or Dottie.
Dottie. Yes, Dottie.
Or Aunt Fran.
Aunt Fran. Yeah, no, none of those. Yeah, we've lost those. So we have new names.
Mary was common in the 1st century.
Mary was very common. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Just a very common name, but she did have wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part is, and we're going to go here. I don't want to too much, but people say, well, this is all made up fabrication. I'm going, no. You got to have a lot of time on your hands to really put something like this together. You may not believe it's all true. I'm not saying that, but there's enough there where you're going, okay, and the sources are early enough where you go, something happened, and you can't say this is just like a good literature, good fiction. But the question is how much is accurate? But even if you don't believe in a stitch, just playing that game, it's still created. And those ideas are in there. And those ideas, we're still dealing with the realm of ideas where patriarchy seems to be fighting this system connected to Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene is all about Christianity is a male as well as a female movement, and it's inclusive of both. And after all, we all have the spirit and soul, and it's not gendered. It transcends gender, and we are all together. And so leadership doesn't have to be with just men; it could be with women too. And then you're going to have this movement in the West that's represented by the Paul or Petrine, Peter, Paul, not Peter, Paul, and Mary. It's just Peter and Paul versus Mary. And did you recognize the animosity between Peter and Mary and that tradition? And it's not just in one place. We keep running into it. And then Hippolytus makes things worse by admitting that they had trouble listening to Mary, and Jesus was not happy about that. And I guess he scolded them, but he already supposedly resurrected. So I guess as he's resurrected, he's going, by the way, you should have believed Mary, as he's glowing and walking through doors. It's like, wow. So, we do have, even in the Catholic tradition, that Peter is stubborn-headed, and wouldn't listen. And of course, obviously, later on, Paul will enter into that area. Because remember, Paul is the 13th apostle. He was never there amongst the 12. So he's additional. But we put these traditions together. But yeah. So yeah,
I think Peter was jealous of Mary.
Peter was
probably
jealous.
He wanted to be the number one.
Well, yeah, and that brings up another topic. And here we go. Boy. So. I should have a towel around my neck. Another topic. Okay, go. No, yeah, I got chalk. No, and that is this: is that leadership in the early church, according to the Book of Acts and Galatians, and even the Thomas tradition and other places, went to James the Righteous. James the Righteous is the head of the church. And he is Jewish Christianity. And he's based in Jerusalem. So, for example, the conference in Jerusalem, where they're trying to decide between, do we let Gentiles in or not into Christianity? James the Righteous is presiding over that decision. He's the one who says, let the Gentiles in. And of course, Paul was there at that meeting. Of course, obviously, Peter was as well. And so you have this tradition. Now, what happens is that James the Righteous dies in 66, 67 CE. He dies. But there is somebody who follows after James the Righteous. It was like a relative of Joseph. That makes sense? And so still the line, the family of Jesus. Leadership in the church is Jerusalem. But then the Romans destroyed Jerusalem in 70 CE. When they destroyed Jerusalem in 70 CE, where should the leadership of the church go? There's like, where's the headship go? We lost the head, we lost the lineage, we lost the Jewish Christianity direct line. I mean, they do continue with Jews for a while until we get to the latter part of the second century. But the point is, is that there's now a fight for who's going to be in charge. And so Rome goes, we should be the leaders. It should go to us. Because Peter and Paul founded our church. Got it? So leadership go to us. The problem is Peter and Paul are dead in 70 CE. They're already dead. Peter died between 64 to 65. Paul died around 66. They're dead. So who are they to claim primacy? Well, Peter and Paul, it's Linus. So it sounds like a peanuts. That's the guys. Yes, there is a pope by the name of Linus. Yeah, you picture him. He has like a little blanket. Okay. Anyway, so what they're going to do is Rome is going to do kind of a post facto, not an ipso facto. What they'll do is go, we're going to go back and say that it goes back to these two dead guys, Peter and Paul, and say that that's where the church continues. And this is where Gentile Christianity, this is where, of course, Western Christianity, Latin Christianity, Catholicism, this is where that comes from. Meanwhile, the Johannine tradition, and John goes, hey, wait a second. Hello? Hi? Why? Because John is still alive, or at least one of the Johns. He's still alive. The 70 CE, he's still alive. He's not going to die until 98. He's got a lot of years. And he says, hey, guess what? Remember the whole story, or the claim story, or the tradition of the story? Jesus looks down from the cross and says, behold your mother. And that was part of the family of Jesus. So I'm now connected to that lineage. And so leadership goes through John the Apostle directly. And who's part of that tradition? Mary Magdalene. And so Mary Magdalene is a big deal in that tradition. Is that okay? Does that make sense? Mary Magdalene's all over the Gospel of John. So, and where does John go? He goes to Ephesus. And so Ephesus becomes the primacy. And so we have a succession of bishops that come from John. And in fact, there's a letter written by Paul Crates of Ephesus. And he's telling the Pope of the West to leave them alone. because he said that John has more authority than he does. Isn't that interesting? He said, no, I don't listen to you. I listen to the line of John. So that argument happens around 180 CE. Is this fascinating? So there's an argument going on. And because the Johannine church claims that legacy, and they're more prophetic, they have Montanism, they're more ecstatic, they're more philosophical, they're more Platonic, mystical. Lots of women in the Johannine tradition. I mean, lots of women. So they're all over Turkey, Asia Minor. So we have all these female martyrs in connection. So I mean, we actually have some listed over here too. Women who are prominent within the church that's connected to John, right? You do have a Paul school in Turkey and in Asia Minor at that time, in Ephesus, and there probably was two churches, one for John and one connected to more Paul or Pauline perspective. So that's what happens. So the Johanna, and then what happens, it gets worse, is that then, if that's not enough, there is the Latin West takes a look at the Johannine East, and they think they're a bunch of heretics, so they're, and so they declare that the Gospel of John, the book of Revelation, they're heretical in the year 202 CE. And so they're out of communication. Then what happens is that the Church of Rome splits into two, and there's a Johannine Pope, and there is, which is Hippolytus, who I just quoted from, who talks about the apostles not listening to Mary Magdalene. That's that guy. Yeah, he becomes the head of the Johannine Church of Rome, and Calixtus becomes the part of the Pauline, and they keep fighting, and through those lines until 235. And 235, what happens is that they're ordered during Roman persecutions, they get thrown to the mines of Sardinia, and the last thing they supposedly say is, "Can't we just be peaceful again?" And then they die in the mines. And so 235, they're united again. But what happens then from there is the Church of Ephesus is the primary church, and that will switch to Constantinople, and that will become Eastern Orthodoxy.
That answers my question. There we go.
Yeah.
So the East is Johannine, and the West is Pauline. That's why Mary Magdalene is wonderful, big news in the East, and this tells you why Mary Magdalene is denigrated in the West. Now, does it make sense? Because now it's this East and West fight. It's this Rome, Ephesus, or Rome, Constantinople kind of conflict going on there.
Yeah.
And so why not? And Gregory goes, why not make her a prostitute? Apparently, let's just make it worse, And so you're going to see this, but you're going to have women in priest positions in the Eastern Orthodox Church until we get into the 9th century. Did you guys know that? Yeah, so you're learning too much. I highly recommend the book by Karen Torgerson, When Women Were Priests. She taught at Claremont Graduate University. There's a book out, and you can read. She documents everything, so you can see through archaeology and inscriptions and so forth.
Okay.
There we go. Which, of course, brings up a whole other topic. Apparently, you're having a big convention in Germany right now, huh? Where the Catholic Church, the German Catholic Church, they're moving towards what happened today or yesterday, blessing gay marriages.
Oh.
Against the going against the papacy, and they said the next thing they're thinking about doing is marry priests too. So it looks like there's some things going happening. Anyway,
Excellent.
Yeah. Any other questions, or am I answering, or just am I creating more problems? It is a fascinating topic. It really is.
Absolutely.
And and having been to these places, so I've seen these, all these places that I'm talking about. I've been there. So when I'm talking about Visalet or Maximin or Samaria de la Mar, the cave, or I'm talking about Ephesus or Constantinople or whatever it may be, I see flashes of these places. And I knew very well when I was eating those peaches that most likely at one of these, I'm eating a peach where some great event. But what I used to do is I used to just take naps. So I get a whole bunch of peaches. It gets hot in the summer in Ephesus and in Turkey, and the other archaeologists too. You got to take a break, especially in mid-afternoon. So, and the sarcophagi, I do have photographs. Yes, I'm terrible. I do have photographs of me actually laying inside these sarcophagi because I know nobody believed me, so I did take pictures. and me go acting like I'm coming out of them. But, yeah, yeah. So,
He has risen.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I did think to myself as I'm laying there, 'cause it's nice and cool with the marble, so cool. So I'm sitting there eating peaches, and I'm thinking, who was laid to rest here? And just interesting. I mean, it's kind of
Yeah,
gory, but and then I'd fall asleep. Then I have strange dreams,
I bet.
Yeah.
and then I wake up and going, oh,
Make sure you wake up when somebody hovers over you. You don't want to be
I
seen.
actually have people hover over me. Yeah, yep. Sometimes I've even had a guard with a gun. Yeah.
That's,
So
I think he meant ghosts.
Yeah, of course, the good news is I had papers on me because I was recognized. So I show my papers. They're like, it's a headache. It's like, well, this person approved me here, and I have archaeologist. Okay, go back to sleep. But then you're kind of after that, the map is over. Yeah.
So I do have a quick question for you. So obviously the traditions of Mary in as we said, in Eastern and Western viewpoints differ significantly. Do you ever foresee a future where they realign? I mean, it seems like there's just so much actual evidence that points to the Eastern belief being the true and more factual belief of Mary's background than the Western. Is there a possibility of acceptance within there, and understanding there's a lot of religious undertones and connotations there that tradition is very tough to change, but can history override that?
Yes. Where I see that needs to happen with Gregory the First. Of course, the idea is popes cannot be infallible, but maybe we can say that he is saying this as an opinion as opposed to an official precept of the church. That will give a wiggle room. And if we do that, if we declare that, then what happens is that we can forever remove Mary Magdalene from being a prostitute. And that will lead to other kinds of questions. Well, if she's not a prostitute, what is she? And then, of course, we can start bringing in these early church traditions of leadership within the Eastern Orthodox Church, equal to the apostles. And you may not get Jesus having Mary as his wife, but at least we'll get Mary as a leader in the church. And that would really promote change because she was a leader in the church in the Eastern perspective.
Absolutely.
In the Western too, but mostly the Eastern. Huh?
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be a massive step forward for the belief system within that structure.
It should be a conference, a big meeting, and Holy Synod, have the Pope, Francis there, because he's looking for initiatives to give women more positions.
He's quite progressive.
Yeah, he is. No, he wants women, in a sense, in a deaconess role to do more kinds of things, maybe even officiate the liturgy. Yeah, and so this would give him ammo. Foremost of the apostles, or equal to the apostles, and her as a venerated leader within the church, and she's the one who had a very close, passionate relationship with Jesus. And what I love about this is that whether you believe it's true or not doesn't matter. The point is that still the depiction of Mary and John is pretty passionate, and that idea of passion goes into all these other traditions. So people say, well, I only believe the Bible. That's all I believe. Well, that's all we need. And we're still stuck with, as opposed to don't touch me. It's like, don't throw yourself at me, in a passionate way. Well, how do you know? You just break down the Greek.
Well, I found that interesting too, what you said about that, how it was translated as, or they translated as, just get away from me.
Yeah.
It was actually like, but imagine like what her reaction must have been. It's like your best friend and you've been traveling with him, all those years, and then you see that he's resurrected. She was probably freaking out, I'd be all over, hugging him and kissing his feet, but then he probably was like, well, we got to be incognito here right now, like until, like, let's not draw too much attention,
Right.
We don't want the Romans getting wind of this.
Well, yeah, and of course, what I like about it is whether one believes this is true or not, it really gives a human equation to it. it really does seem like something that somebody would experience. It's like,
Yeah.
if you saw somebody you love, you're right. That, who is suddenly, behind you, wouldn't you think that's somebody else? It's got to be the gardener. I like that. It's like, he's got to be the gardener. It can't be really him. It's like, oh,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that could be kind of scary too. If you saw a loved one behind you in the graveyard. By the way, a little bit more trivia. Obviously you could visit the tomb of Jesus in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So that's where it is today. I've been in there, of course, hung around there. And it is, the reason why I'm bringing this up is that there are a whole bunch of other tombs in the area. So it was on the other side of the Golgotha, and there was the tombs of various criminals and the rocks. If you go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, they have a few places where you can take a look and see some of the other tombs that were there. So it's kind of an interesting site where she's in the graveyard. So it has a little bit more. I know you're picturing this. There's a fake site called the Garden Tomb that all the Protestants go to. That really wasn't it. What happened is that they misunderstood the idea of the walls of Jerusalem, and they misunderstood that the Roman walls during the time of Jesus were in a different place from the walls of the Aelia Capitolina, the one that was built under Hadrian, and then the Turkish walls. And so what happened is that as they think, well, the tomb is outside the walls, and of course the real tomb was outside the walls, but the walls then later on went around it. But the Protestants not thinking, well, it must be these tombs outside the walls, which are built way later on. And so they have the Garden Tomb, and it's a beautiful, idyllic area. And you have this garden, fountains, and it's nobody's buried there except for this one beautiful tomb that was already used. It's already like 150 years old before the time of Christ. So it's supposed to be a newly hewn tomb. So I don't know where to get that. I just remember when I was there, there's a guy singing to his love with a guitar, and he was singing out of tune. And it was awful. It was awful. I mean, this guy could not, he was like tone deaf. And so here you have this trickling waters, beautiful tomb, and this guy singing, and she's like, I'm like, I'm making a beeline out of here. Hanging in there. So the real tomb, would be in the city itself. Now it's interesting because Aelia Capitolina, a long story, really short, make it really short. Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 CE. They bury everything except for the Wailing Wall and 3 towers, which are since lost. And what happens is that Jews are forbidden to go there. And later on, the Emperor Trajan wanted some favors of the Jews. He ruled from 98 to 117, and said, if you guys support me in my attack to Parthia, I may just return. I might just restore Jerusalem. They're all, yay, that's great, wonderful, wonderful. Okay. So that was the promise made by Trajan. Well, what happens, Trajan dies, and the Emperor Hadrian becomes emperor. Hadrian, he arrives in Jerusalem. They're all, yeah, he's going to return, he's going to restore the temple. Yay. And Rabbi Akiva is excited. And of course, Hadrian takes a look at the site and says, I'm going to dedicate this to temple to the gods of Rome. Jupiter, Juno, Minerva. We'll call it Aelia Capitolina. And Akiva's going, oh crap. And so what happened is they built a city that was called Aelia Capitolina, but as a result, you have the second Jewish revolt. Okay, where am I going with this? Well, what happened is when Hadrian built the city, he also was not exactly great when it comes to Christians. Okay. And he knew, according to early sources, he knew that there was a venerated site connected to early Christianity where Jesus was buried. And so what he did is he had built on top of it a temple dedicated to Aphrodite. Does that make sense? And so
Yeah.
later on, a guy by the name of Constantine the Great, he will remove the temple of Aphrodite, and the tomb will be under there. So let's remember. I mean, Hadrian hits in again. This is 117 to 138. This is the middle of the 2nd century. So this is a good source. If that makes sense. Is that helpful? Good night, Dorian. Does that make sense? So so you're having another interesting situation where, if somebody's building a temple on top of the site, and despite you, it's probably the site. Traditions go back pretty far back in time. Again, 2nd century. So I hope that helps. Yeah. So the traditional site is there today. I remember going to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre one time, and I went to the Armenian side, and I did there. I took a nap. It's nice and cool there. It's such a hot day. You gotta watch me. What I like to do is I like taking naps in holy places. So, I don't know. I always, it's an ancient idea of, maybe sleeping in temples, getting strange dreams. But I always like the dreams that I have so far. So yeah, I fell asleep in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. There's a section that you can go to where there's nobody, just nobody there. That's the Armenian section. And that's pretty cool.
I feel like you could have a whole Instagram story of just where I slept in famous archaeological sites.
No, I can't. There's other places I slept too. Yeah. One time I slept in Magnesia and the Meander. I slept in a part of an ancient gymnasium. I slept there. It's part of it's buried in the sand, and I got underneath, and it was nice and shady, and I don't worry about bugs or rats, or I don't know. I just don't think about it.
It's your next book.
It's my next book. Sleeping around in archaeology. It will sell. People will be excited about, wow, this will be about Dr. Ethan delving across all over in archaeology. Who does he meet next time? And you'll be really disappointed and then I decided I'm going to sleep here. But maybe you can put signs up, James slept here. You slept here though. But yeah, I do like, I had in Europe, I lived in Holland for 7 months one time, and a couple months another time, and a month another time. And I had my own favorite castle. And I used to go into these castle ruins that were ruined. I used to go into the ruins or into the fields around it, and I'd actually take naps there at the castle. And then I had my own favorite castle in Germany, where I lived for 4 months one time, and that was Zwingenberg. And my castle where I used to sleep in is Auerbach Castle in Palmer Hill. So I'm serious. It is a problem. You thought I was joking.
Or an opportunity.
Yeah. So yep. Once again, I'm a person who believes that you can really connect historically with a place and feel the essence and the energy. And if you allow yourself to, revealing secrets here, if you're allowing yourself to go into a state of unconsciousness, who knows what you tap into or what you sense that you saw.
Absolutely. That extreme, it's essentially an extreme state of meditation that you open yourself up to tap into the historical presence. No, I agree. That's awesome.
Yeah. You have the sense. And I did learn this. It was an accident. I mean, you think it's a syndrome. I never talked about this topic before. Write this down. No, we're living in Germany. My parents took me to Rothenburg, Opti Tauber, and it's this beautiful German town. And we had our hotel, and part of our room was cut inside the walls of the city, and you could see part of the wall. It went up right where my bed was literally cut into the wall, and I slept there and I had the greatest, amazing dreams. That was back in 1983. And that's what got me into the habit. Yeah. So it's my parents' fault. Going, okay. Dreams of nights and it's almost like a time travel story, you know. But it's fun. Any other questions, or are you guys exhausted now? So, no. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap this up and
All
let
right.
you also have your dreams. So I hope you enjoyed tonight.
Yes.
I guess I'm talking about something next time. What am I talking about?
I put a whole list in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah. So Cleopatra, May 27,
Oh, glad.
and Akhenaten III, along with Nefertiti and Tutankhamun. And then we have the Nag Hammadi Library on June 13.
Oh, you're gonna love that one. So hope you enjoy my discussion of Gnosticism already, little bits and pieces. So get ready for more.
Yeah, that'll tie into tonight's discussion.
Sure will.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I hit upon some of those texts. So we'll go a little bit deeper. And then I'll go into my background with the Nag Hammadi. So I have some background here. In fact, maybe I'll take some of my files out. So I have James Robinson. I have some of his papers here, some of his books. You know, the guy that made the Nag Hammadi library, he's the guy who published it, brought it together. That's why I knew him. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about my experiences with Marvin Meyer, with James Robinson, with Carole King, and a few others. That Elaine Pagels, I know her, of course. So interesting stuff. So, and I'll bring that in the conversation and my work with the Nag Hammadi and so forth. That should be fun.
That should be fun. I can't wait.
Yeah. So, okay.
All right,
Well,
great job. I'm out.
Yeah. So thank you so much, and I will see you next time.
Okay.
Thank
Good
Thank
night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great job.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.